We're going to be grouting the backsplash, and I'm going to be putting in the rest of the stuff that the homeowner has left for me to finish up. We're going to be using a pre-mixed grout. For the average homeowner, I'd recommend going this route. You don't have to mix anything up. I do it just for the speed and the convenience of having it pre-mixed. But I'm going to pull all these grout spacers out and get started on grouting the backsplash, and I'll show you that as I'm working on it. Another thing that he had me add is with their new quartz countertops, they didn't want any switches on top of the counter for the disposal, so we're going to be adding in an air switch, which for people that don't know what it is, basically your disposal will plug into this box, and then you have a small button that can either be mounted on the countertop surface or the face of the cabinet, and you just push this button and it operates a small vacuum line that turns the inside of this box a switch off and on, and turns your disposal off and on via the hint why they call it an air switch. But I'll be installing this so that way they have a spot down here. They don't have to open the cabinet door. I don't have to put a hole in the countertop for a switch so that they can run the disposal. But we'll get this put in, and I'll get this backsplash grouted up. So as I said, we're going to be using a pre-mixed grout. This is what they call a grout float. It's basically just a piece of rubber with a handle on it. They make some different ones. You can get foam or whatever suits your liking. But on pre-mixed grout especially, the basic premise for grouting, if you're not familiar with it, is you're going to use the float. You're basically just going to scoop out an amount of grout that you want to use, and then you basically use what they call the float to just smash it into the tile. And on vertical surfaces, that's generally what's going to happen. Most of it's going to wind up falling onto your backsplash or your floor or whatever. The one nice thing about using a pre-mixed grout is that it's a little bit thicker. If you're buying bag mixed grout and you're going to do this, I would kind of mix it on the thicker side, whatever the bag recommendations are for how much water you're going to add. But I would keep it a little bit on the thicker side. If you're grouting a vertical surface, you can thin it down some if you're doing something horizontal on the floor. But the thinner you get it, a lot of times you end up with air pockets in it, and it dilutes the grout down, so you don't wind up with as much of the grout actually in the tile, and as it dries, you'll get air pockets and stuff. That's one benefit to this, is you don't get a lot of shrinkage or cracking. But the basic idea is that you're just going to put some grout onto the float, you're going to smear it into the tile, and then keep working it and fill in all of those joints that you had the grout spacers in. And you want to kind of try to get as much of it off as you can with your grout float and keep working. Now, one thing is don't work a bigger area than you can clean off, especially a lot of pre-mixed grouts. They have a silicone base to them, and this stuff once it starts to dry, it sticks to the tile. It's not as bad on a subway tile, but if you're doing like a mosaic or a natural stone, or even some type of a wood look tile that's porous, this stuff will get so stuck on there that you can't get it off. And they do make a product called Grout Release, and that will help get that off, but you don't want to have to get to that point where you have to get another product. So I generally work an area that I can get done in a relative short amount of time, and then I'll stop, come back, and you'll basically have a bucket of water and a sponge, and you'll sponge this area off and clean it up. And then basically as it starts to haze back up, you can clean your sponge out or clean out your water in your bucket as you need to, sponge the towel back off again. And then what I generally do on a smooth towel like Subway is I do one to two times I'll sponge the tile down, and then I take a microfiber towel or some sort of a dry rag, and that's what I've found to be the easiest on a lot of tiles, is you can wipe the haze back off of it with a dry rag, because a lot of times keeping your water from getting dirty as you're sponging off your tile is next to impossible. You wind up with a film every time no matter how clean the sponge is or how much you're changing your water, you wind up with a film back over the tile as the tile starts to dry down. So I like to take a dry rag I'll sponge the towel down, like I said, 1 or 2 times, and then I dry rag it off. But that's basically how I do it. I'll probably start working this area and get it filled in, and I'll just set the camera up so that you can kind of see what I'm doing as I'm working. I'm going to take a break from grouting for a second. I just find grouting to be super monotonous, but I've got down past a few of the things that I still need to hook up. So what I'm going to do is probably go ahead and put the pot filler on. I kind of do it in stages to where I'm completely done with that area, and then I move down. That way, should something happen, I get a call, I have to leave, I go to lunch, whatever the case is, I don't have a giant mess throughout the customer's kitchen. Or floor or whatever you're doing. I just find it to be a little easier to work that way. But anyway, they wanted us to change some of these backsplash outlets while we were doing this, so that way, because they didn't have any original GFI protection. Now this is something that comes up pretty regularly on a lot of our inspection repairs and stuff with real estate. But what I've done is I've went ahead and I've had these 2 outlets pulled loose. This outlet has 4 wires going to it, and the outlet down there has 1. Now my assumption is, before I take this loose, this outlet is my feed, and that one's being ran from this outlet. Now if that's the case, you can save yourself some money because GFIs can run anywhere from $20 to $30. And what you can do is take the outlet out that is the power feed that the power's coming into, and then your outlet that's being fed, you can feed with your GFI. So you can leave a regular outlet down there, and you can put a GFI here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the 2 power wires off of this outlet, see which one is my feed, and then I'm going to see if that kills that outlet down the backsplash. Now some people wouldn't want to disconnect this with the power on. I do it on a pretty regular basis, so I'm not too concerned about it. But if you're concerned with that, go to your breaker panel, locate the breaker, shut it off, disconnect the wires, turn the breaker, isolate them to where nothing's touching, turn the breaker back on, and then make sure you find out which wire is your hot. Because when you're hooking up a GFCI, you need to know which wire is the hot wire, because there's 2 different sides to a GFI. I'll show you in a minute. But my assumption is that one of these 2 is feeding that outlet down there. So that's my hot leg, and what that means is that this secondary wire here is being fed off of this outlet. It's feeding something else. Now whether that's another outlet, a light, some older homes that would be the case, it may be a light or something else. But when you put in a GFI, you don't really want, you want to make sure that if you're feeding something off of that GFCI, that you're okay with that being GFI breaker protected. So if it's a refrigerator or something of that nature, you may want to make a junction in the back of the box and then just leave that GFCI on its own. So not to basically feed it off of the GFI to where it's protected, because if it trips or something, you're going to lose a lot of food in your refrigerator, or say it was a sump pump, or there's a variety of different things that you would not want to GFCI protect, and then that breaker trip, you're out of town, your refrigerator leaks all over your floor, your sump pump stops running, something of that nature. So just find out what it's feeding and know that you're feeding the correct appliances. But we'll go down here, I'll see if this outlet's still hot. And it's not. So that's what my assumption was. That outlet down there is being fed from this outlet. So being as that it's on the backsplash, you can save yourself about $30 by not adding in another GFI down there. You only need one, and I'll show you how to wire it so that way that outlet is fed and protected through the GFCI. Okay, so I got my GFCI. I've got my wires separated here. What I typically do is just separate the wires, and I cap my hot leg. So that way, nothing that I touch is going to shock me in any way, unless I was to touch this wire and my common. For people that aren't comfortable working on it hot, or just this isn't something you do all the time, I would just recommend shutting the breaker off and then work on it that way. A lot of times we don't, just because you wind up shutting down a lot of stuff in somebody's house or whatever, and it's not something that I'm overly concerned with while I'm working on it. So just work with whatever you're comfortable with. So that outlet down there, we're going to switch out for one of the USB style outlets. For people that haven't seen them, you have two plugs on either side. That way you can plug in a tablet or something else, and you're not eating up your plug spaces. So we've installed a few here in the kitchen for them. So on the GFI, what I was talking about, this bottom side is got a piece of tape over it. And if you read it on there, basically what it's telling you is that when you wire this outlet, if you just had one wire feeding out of the box here, and by one wire I mean one piece of Romex, that would give you a ground, a neutral, and a hot. And what you would do is you would just hook that up if you wanted a GFI right here, and put your neutral on your neutral side and hot and so forth, and then put it back in, and it's going to work just like a normal GFI. But if you're feeding another outlet from the GFI and you're going to have it protected, then you actually will take this sticker off of that side, and then you're going to, and what they call it is a line side and a load side. The line side would be the hot feed, and your load side is going to be what you're feeding. So that's basically exactly what we're going to do here. I'm going to put the hot side onto my line side of the receptacle. I'm going to put the switch, or the receptacle that I'm feeding down there, on the load side, and that'll take care of it. And then I'll test it. I'll show you how, if I use a tester like this and I trip that outlet, it will trip this GFI down here. And that's something really common in a kitchen. That way, if you have an appliance plugged in and then something falls into the sink, somebody doesn't get electrocuted. So I'll get these put on, and I'll turn the video back on. I'll show you how they function. Okay, so I have a GFCI circuit tester here. I've got my GFI on, and what I'll do is I'll go down here to this outlet. I'll use this tester, hit the button, make sure that I'm tripping this circuit down here, which means it would be fed properly. And if you heard that click, what it was is this GFI right here actually got tripped, and it should show no power, which it does. But as soon as I hit the reset button, I have a green light. This tester has been finicky for me. Let's see if this one shows everything's wired up good. Okay, and that shows correct wiring. But I have a couple different ones. Sometimes these can read bad. Sometimes they can give you a false reading. So if you're doing a lot of these, sometimes it doesn't hurt to have a couple different means of checking it. But what it does is these testers generally make the ground trip, is what it does in the GFCI. So it'll test that GFI to make sure that it's working properly. It's simulating a arc event is what they're doing. Now I'll move on to the pot filler, and then I'll finish grouting the backsplash. As I showed, we're going to put this pot filler on now. This thing has two different shutoffs on it, so I was looking at it. This one, if you can see that, shuts off a valve inside, which I guess you can leave this shut off so that somebody doesn't hit the other handle out at the end and you dump a bunch of water all over your stove. And then it has your other shut off out here. But what I've done is I went ahead and prepped up the valve that came with it. Now what I did was I used a 1/2-inch pipe nipple to a threaded crimpable connection with my PEX. One thing I did want to include that I've ran into on some of these fittings, I was talking to a plumbing buddy of mine, and I said, you know, I've thread taped many fittings, and sometimes you wind up getting a drip out of them, even if something only calls for pipe thread or pipe tape on the threads. And I think what it is a lot of these fittings are machined just a little bit differently, and some of the threads are really sharp, and then as you put them on, it winds up cutting through some of the tape, and you get a small drip out of it from time to time. But I asked him, I said, what do you all do to remedy, you know, to make sure you don't have any leaks where you're not constantly going around and rechecking all of your threaded connections? He said, pretty much every plumber out there winds up pipe taping and pipe doping using the Teflon sealant on top of their pipe tape. So you just do your normal amount of wraps on your Teflon tape, and then you use a pipe dope on it as well. And since I've been doing that, I haven't had a single problem out of any type of pipe thread. So hopefully that'll help somebody out there. I just wanted to throw that in. So what I'll go ahead and do is pull this out, make sure I have enough room that when I crimp this that I can push that back in the wall so where this flange is flush, and then I'll install the filler. Now I do have a stud, like I said, on the left side of this, so I'm just going to put 2 screws in the flange, but you know, I'm going to be careful too to make sure that when I run those threads in, I don't hit my PEX, or run the screws in, I don't hit the PEX with the threads and poke a hole in it. So we'll get this thing screwed on. I'm going to try to hit a grout joint and see if I can get the screw to go through it and not actually have to drill a separate hole. Okay, so I verified that the pot filler is off, or this handle's off here. So this one should be, I believe that's off on this one as well, but I'm going to put something under it just in case you know, I get anything out of it when I turn the water back on. Okay, so the water's back on. I'm going to test it and see what we've got. So it works, and I'm just going to leave it there for the homeowner to use. Okay everybody, so we only have a couple things left to wrap up. I've got to get into the kitchen sink and add in a couple of things. One's the air switch for the disposal, and I need to add in a steward vent. This was one thing that the customer had requested. Obviously this is an island, so we have no wall above it, so there's no vent here to help the plumbing go down. It goes down just fine, but he was getting some gurgling through the trap, so if that's something that you're running into at home, you can get a steward vent, also called an AAV or an air admittance valve. What it basically does is takes the place of not having a vent and can help with some plumbing. What it has inside is basically a flap that will open and close to allow for air and allow the water to go down when you don't have a roof vent. So basically what it goes in place before you have the trap hooked up to the sink. So for his application, it's going to be fairly simple. I'm going to basically tee off of the 2-inch that's coming into the bottom of the cabinet, and then I will plumb in the vent. Your trap will be here, and this will be before the trap. So basically this will just hook up, allow the water to go down, and then I'll be putting in the air switch as well. So I'll hook the camera up, or I'll reset the camera up, and I'll kind of show you what I'm doing underneath the sink, and we'll get this thing wrapped up. got the vent all plumbed up. I'm sure you can see that. Well, a lot of times I get questions of why you need a vent, and people don't understand this. So house plumbing, basically, it's kind of like pouring gas out of a gas can. They have a cap on one side that as you're pouring, you open up the back cap, and that allows that vacuum to go down. So it gives air so that the bottle's not, or the can's not getting squeezed in from the air. House plumbing's the same way. If you don't have a vent coming through your roof, or they put plumbing on one side of the house and there's a vent on the other, generally that side won't drain very well, and it's the same thing. So that's just why we added one, and it was just to kind of help, so he didn't have any issues down the road, so he asked if we could put one in. But as far as an air switch, you have a box like this, you have a plug on it. What you're going to do is use your plug that's under the sink, so it's plugged in and has power. Then you're going to plug in, it has two plugs on it, so you're going to plug in the disposal into the box. And the reason that they call this an air switch is you have a piece of poly tubing that connects to the box into a small switch. And like I said, it can be counter mounted. This particular one, I think they want just something mounted here on the face of the cabinet, so I'm going to drill this through, and you're just going to see this button. That way you don't have to open the cabinet to flip a switch. I don't have another hole in the granite. So it makes life a little easier. But what this does is this is an air operated switch. That's why they call it an air button, or an air switch. And it's pulling a vacuum and opening a switch inside that's using power from the box that's plugged in to turn on the disposal. So when I push this button, it should turn on the disposal if everything's working right. And so I'm sure you could probably hear that on the video, but it's just pulling a small vacuum, allowing the switch to operate. So everything's good. I'm going to go ahead and install it this way. Customer's probably going to watch me doing this in their driveway on their Ring camera, so it's going to be kind of funny later for them. I just wanted to wrap the video up and say that it's been a little bit of a long project. There's been some hiccups, at least as far as some materials that we had that were back ordered due to the pandemic, and a few small hiccups, but just wanted to say how awesome our customers have been to work with. They've been really awesome and really understanding. And hopefully they like everything that we've done in the total product. And then I also wanted to tell them thanks for allowing me to do some filming the last couple of days as far as wrapping up the project in the kitchen. So I think that's pretty much it. If you're new to the channel, hang around, hit the subscribe button. I try to put videos out like this all the time. This one's a little bit different, where I'm actually shooting as far as my work and on the go, but if people like this, just let me know. Comment down below. I'll try to do this more often. And then, you know, give us a thumbs up and a like. Share the videos. We really appreciate it. All those things help the channel. So we appreciate you being here. We look forward to seeing you on the next video. And take care.